Welcome to the banks of the river Danube in the year 170 after Christ. Here, along the northern frontier of the Roman Empire, the greatest military force the world has ever known stands guard against the Germanic tribes beyond. But tonight we do not follow the footsteps of the soldiers or the clash of shields. Instead, we slip quietly into the tent of the most powerful man on earth, where MarcusAurelius, Emperor of Rome, sets aside the burdens of command to become simply a man seeking wisdom. In the flickering light of the oil lamps, surrounded by maps of distant provinces and dispatches from every corner of his vast empire, Marcus takes up his reed pen and begins to write. These are not official proclamations or military orders, but private thoughts addressed to himself, personal reflections that will become the Meditations, one of history's most profound works of philosophy. Tonight, we witness the philosopher-emperor at his most vulnerable and human, as he struggles with the same questions that have troubled thoughtful people for centuries. How do we find peace in a chaotic world? How do we maintain our humanity when power corrupts? How do we face suffering in our own mortality with grace? Close your eyes and journey back nearly 2,000 years to a Roman military camp where the most powerful man alive seeks not conquest but understanding. The year is 170 after Christ, and the Roman Empire stretches from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to the Euphrates River. It is the largest empire the world has ever known, governing over 60 million souls under the authority of one man, Marcus Aurelius. Now 49 years old and in his 9th year of his reign. But tonight the emperor sits not in marble splendour, but in a leather tent beside the grey waters of the Danube. For 3 years now, the northern frontier has demanded his personal attention. The Germanic tribes have shattered their treaties with Rome and invaded Italy itself for the first time in 2.5 centuries. Marcus has been forced to become a campaigning emperor, though he would rather spend his days in philosophical contemplation. The irony weighs on him, a man who seeks wisdom compelled to direct the destruction of his fellow human beings. The Roman military camp spreads like a temporary city across the landscape, housing 25,000 soldiers and the massive apparatus needed to maintain an army in hostile territory. The camp is surrounded by earthen ramparts topped with wooden stakes, each positioning according to the centuries of military doctrine. Outside these defences, the Germanic territories stretch into dense forests. These were once peaceful lands where Roman merchants travelled safely. Now they harbour warriors who have tasted Roman blood and dream of greater victories. Marcus has established his headquarters in Carnuntum, near what will one day be Vienna. From here he coordinates not just a military campaign, but the governance of the entire empire. Dispatches arrive daily from every province, requiring his attention to taxation, justice, and administration. The weight of ruling 60 million people never leaves his shoulders. The emperor's tent stands at the camp's centre, spartanly furnished by imperial standards. Maps cover wooden tables, marked with legion positions and enemy movements. Scrolls containing correspondence overflow from wooden chests. Oil lamps cast dancing shadows onto the tent walls. But the most telling objects are neither military nor administrative. On a small wooden desk lie several papyrus scrolls covered in Marcus's own handwriting. These contain his private thoughts, philosophical reflections, written in Greek intended for no audience but himself. They represent the innermost struggles of absolute power. Tonight, as autumn settles over the Danube Valley and cold winds hit at winter's approach, Marcus prepares for his evening ritual. After a day of military councils and imperial decisions, he turns to one pursuit that brings him peace, the practice of Stoic philosophy through writing. As the sun sets behind the Germanic forests, casting long shadows across the Roman camp, the sounds of military life gradually subside. The evening watch takes position along the ramparts. Cooking fires spring up as soldiers prepare their simple meals. The air fills with wood smoke and the damp earth of autumn. In his headquarters, Marcus concludes the final meeting with his officers. Maps are rolled up, dispatches sealed, tomorrow's orders confirmed. Each decision carries the weight of life and death, not just for his soldiers, but for civilians throughout the empire who depend on Roman protection. As his officers file out with quiet salutes, Marcus remains at his desk. For a moment he sits in silence, allowing the tension of command to drain from his shoulders. The transformation from emperor to private individual requires conscious effort, a deliberate setting aside of the purple cloak of authority. Marcus moves to a basin of warm water prepared by his servants. He washes his hands and face with deliberate care, a ritual that helps him transition from public demands to private reflection. The simple act becomes symbolic of washing away the day's accumulation of decisions and frustrations. His attendants help him remove his military dress, replacing it with a simple tunic for private reflection. Unlike the elaborate ceremonies of the imperial court, everything here is functional and modest. Marcus has always preferred simplicity, a preference reflecting both in his philosophical training and campaigning life's practical demands. The emperor dismisses his servants with a quiet thanks, preferring solitude for his evening hours. This privacy is precious, perhaps the only time he can truly be himself rather than the symbol of Roman power others expect. In his tense silence, with only distant camp sounds, Marcus can attend to his soul's needs. He lights additional oil lamps around his writing desk, adjusting their position for steady illumination. The desk itself is unremarkable, made of sturdy oak by some camp craftsman, but it has become the most important piece of furniture in his world. Here, night after night, he concludes his most important work, examining his own thoughts and cultivating wisdom. From a wooden desk, Marcus retrieves his writing materials, reed pens carefully prepared by skilled scribes, ink of the finest quality mixed from soot and gum, and precious papyrus scrolls imported from Egypt. On these humble materials, he records thoughts addressing the fundamental questions of human existence. Marcus settles into his simple wooden chair, cushioned with wool padding. Before him lies a partially written scroll, its surface marked with lines of Greek text in careful handwriting. These are his meditations, though he thinks of them simply as daily practice, his way of applying philosophical teachings to life's realities. Taking up his pen begins the transformation from Marcus Aurelius Caesar to Marcus the student of philosophy. The weight of empire becomes manageable, seen through Stoic teachings about duty, virtue, and the power's proper use. Here in this simple tent beside the river, the world's most powerful man becomes simply a human being seeking to understand how to live well. Before we follow Marcus into his reflections, we must understand the intellectual tradition shaping his thoughts. Stoicism began in ancient Athens over 4 centuries before his birth, founded by Zeno of Citium around 300 before Christ. But it has become far more than academic exercise. It is practical philosophy for living, especially relevant to those bearing great responsibilities. The word Stoicism comes from the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch in Athens where Zeno first taught. Unlike other philosophical schools that retreated into ivory towers, the Stoics engaged directly with life's daily challenges. They developed ideas not in academic isolation, but in human existence's messy reality with all its suffering, injustice, and uncertainty. At its heart, Stoicism teaches a deceptively simple principle with profound implications. We cannot control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. This distinction between what is up to us and what is not up to us forms the foundation of all Stoic practice. External events, others' actions, even our own bodies fall into the category of things not entirely under our control, but our judgments, values, responses, and character remain within our power to shape. For Marcus, this teaching takes special significance. As emperor, he faces pressures that would crush most people, responsibility for millions of lives, constant threats to security, the loneliness of absolute power, and knowledge that every decision affects history's course. Yet Stoicism provides a framework for bearing these burdens without being destroyed. The Stoics teach that virtue is the only true good, consisting of 4 cardinal qualities: wisdom, justice, courage and self-discipline. Wisdom means seeing clearly what is true versus mere opinion. Justice involves treating others fairly and working for the common good. Courage encompasses not just physical bravery, but moral courage to do right when difficult. Self-discipline means governing desires and emotions through reason. What makes Stoicism particularly relevant in our modern world is its practical ability. In an age of constant information, social media anxiety, political polarization, and economic uncertainty, the Stoic emphasis on focusing on what we can control while accepting what we cannot resonates powerfully. The philosophy that helped Marcus govern an empire while maintaining sanity and moral integrity offers tools remaining useful for contemporary life success. Marcus learns these ideas from teachers who embody them. His primary tutor, Junius Rusticus, who demonstrates through character what it means to live according to philosophical principles. From Rusticus, Marcus learned that philosophy is not about clever arguments or abstract theories, but about character transformation through disciplined self-examination. Tonight, as Marcus takes up his pen, he practices what Stoics call the view from above, stepping back from immediate concerns to see life from cosmic perspective, recognizing both current problems, transient nature, and our place of existence's larger scheme. From this elevated viewpoint, even the vast Roman Empire appears small against eternity's backdrop, and war and politics take proper proportion. As full darkness settles over the Danube Valley and camp sounds fade to quiet murmurs, Marcus dips his reed pen in ink and begins to write. Oil lamps cast warm, steady glow over his desk, flames dancing gently in barely perceptible breeze through the tense leather walls. Tonight, like so many before, he turns to his most trusted companion in his lonely life of power, his private journal. Greek words flow onto papyrus in his careful handwriting. Unlike formal Latin of imperial decrees, these personal reflections are written in philosophy and poetry's language, the language in which he first learned to think about life's deepest questions. Tonight's entry begins with a fundamental reminder. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. This simple statement captures his daily struggle's essence. Around him, the Roman Empire faces pressures from every direction. Germanic tribes massed beyond the Danube. Reports describe renewed eastern tensions. A devastating plague has swept the empire, killing millions. Economic pressures mount as crisis response drains the treasury. Any challenge alone would test a capable ruler. Together they threaten the Roman world's survival. Yet Marcus has learned through Stoic study that external pressures are not what truly matter. What matters is how he chooses to respond, the character he displays in facing them, and the wisdom he brings to decisions. As he writes, Marcus reflects on the day's frustrations. A supply convoy arrived 3 days late, forcing postponement of planned activities. Intelligence reports about enemy movements proved contradictory. A dispatch from Rome brought news of political maneuvering requiring delicate handling. Each problem demanded attention, pulling him from the larger strategic picture. Rather than dwelling on frustrations, Marcus examines his own responses. Did he become angry when the supply officer offered excuses? Did he treat subordinates with proper respect? Or did command pressure make him harsh? These questions matter because they concern things truly under his control. His thoughts, his words, and his actions. When you wake up in the morning, he writes, continuing with a familiar theme, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. This is not cynicism, but practical wisdom. Marcus has learned that expecting perfection sets him up for constant disappointment and anger. Instead, he prepares mentally for human fallibility while committing to respond with patience and understanding. The best revenge, he writes carefully, is not to be like your enemy. This insight grows from painful experience. Through his reign, Marcus has faced betrayal and deception from those he should have been allies with. The natural response would be to rage and harsh punishment, but Marcus has learned that such responses ultimately harm the one holding them more than their targets. Anger clouds judgment. Vengeance consumes energy better directed towards constructive purposes. Dwell on the beauty of life, Marcus continues. Watch the stars and see yourself running with them. This counsel represents one of his most important practices, deliberately cultivating wonder and gratitude even in difficult circumstances. Outside his tent, the autumn sky blazes with stars, the same constellations that have looked down on countless generations of human struggle and achievement. When command pressures threaten to overwhelm him, Marcus steps outside to contemplate the night sky. This practice helps restore perspective to problems seeming impossibly large from the ground level. The Danube Wars, critical for empire's survival, represent just one moment in cosmic time's vast sweep. Very little is needed to make a happy life, he reflects. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. As emperor, Marcus possesses unimaginable wealth, power over millions, and access to every luxury. Yet he has learned that none guarantee contentment. True happiness comes from thoughts, quality, and actions alignment with deepest values. If you are distressed by anything external, Marcus writes, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. This principle offers practical tools for managing life's inevitable sufferings. Germanic invasions represent genuine threats to Roman security. Thousands have died and thousands may more die. These are objective facts unchained by philosophical reflection. But Marcus's response to these facts, his emotional reaction and assigned meaning, remains under his control. As the night watch calls out the second hour after midnight, Marcus sets down his pens and leans back, contemplating one of his most challenging aspects of philosophical practice, reconciling absolute power's demands with virtue's pursuit. Oil lamps flicker gently as he considers imperial authority's unique moral challenges. What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee, he has written many times, and tonight this principle weighs heavy. As emperor, every decision must balance competing interests, citizens' immediate welfare against empire's long-term security, military needs against civilian government demands, pressure for divisive action against careful deliberation requirements. Marcus reflects on his position's irony. Stoic philosophy teaches that virtue is the only true good and that external circumstances like wealth and power are indifferent to human happiness. Yet here he sits, possessing more external power than perhaps any human in history, using it to make decisions that affect millions. How does one remain virtuous while wielding state force? How does one stay human while exercising authority over vast numbers of fellow humans? The answer lies in understanding power as responsibility rather than privilege. The Roman concept of imperium carries obligation to serve common good rather than personal interest. Marcus approaches imperial duties not as opportunities, but as chances to practice virtue on a scale few people experience. We were born together, Marcus reminds himself, writing words slowly and deliberately, like feet, hands, and eyes, like the two rows of teeth, upper and lower. This passage reflects his struggle to maintain common humanity even in welfare's context. Germanic tribes threatening Roman territory are not abstract enemies to be destroyed without thought, but fellow human beings being driven by their own legitimate survival concerns. Yet Marcus understands his primary duty as emperor is protecting Roman citizens and preserving civilization, providing order, justice, and prosperity for millions. Sometimes this duty requires force against those threatening common good. This challenge lies in exercising such force without hatred, conducting welfare without being corrupted by violence, maintaining humanity while making decisions resulting in death and suffering. In the morning when thou risest unwillingly, he continues, let this thought be present. I am rising to the work of a human being. Then why am I dissatisfied if I am going to do the things for which I exist and for which I was brought into this world? This passage reflects on his daily struggle with command burdens. Some mornings, imperial responsibilities' weight feels almost unbearable, creating powerful temptation to escape into private pleasures. But Marcus has learned to frame duties not as cruel fate's burdens, but as opportunities to fulfill essential nature as rational and social being. Humans are designed to work for common good, using reason in justice's service, finding meaning through virtuous action. For Marcus, serving as emperor represents ultimate expression of those fundamental human purposes. He reflects on his position's loneliness, solitude growing more pronounced each year. Imperial dignity's demands create distance between him and others. Subjects approach with deference, making honest communication difficult. Friends hesitate to offer criticism for fear of appearing presumptuous. The result is isolation, easily breeding cynicism and misanthropy. Marcus combats this isolation through philosophical practice, using writing to maintain connection with great moral teachers and his own highest aspirations. In his meditations, he converses with Socrates about courage facing death, with Epictetus about finding freedom without constraints, and with his teacher Rusticus about applying philosophical principles to daily life. The best way to avenge yourself, he writes, is not to become like your enemy. This principle has particular relevance for someone wielding absolute authority. Constant exposure to flattery, deception, and manipulation surrounding imperial power creates strong temptations towards cynicism, cruelty, and authority abuse. Marcus works consciously to resist such corruption by maintaining strict accountability to philosophical principles. Each evening's writing serves as moral inventory, examining motivations, reviewing actions, recommitting to virtue regardless of external pressures. This practice keeps him anchored to his deepest values, even when governance's immediate demands might seem to justify compromise. Outside Marcus's tent, the Roman military camp settles into nighttime rhythm, a carefully orchestrated symphony of discipline and vigilance protecting Roman armies for centuries. Sounds filtering through leather walls provide constant backdrop to the emperor's philosophical reflections, reminding him of thousands of men whose lives depend on his leadership. The steady tread of hobnailed boots on packed earth marks night watch's passage along camp's perimeter. Every 2 hours, fresh sentries replace comrades and ramparts, maintaining vigilance, keeping Roman armies safe in hostile territory since Marius and Caesar's days. Soft challenge and response of passwords being exchanged drift across darkness, ritual ensuring no enemy can infiltrate defences under night's cover. From stable areas comes occasional stamp of horses and harness jingles as cavalry mounts shift in sleep. These animals represent crucial Roman military power elements, providing mobility and shock action, allowing relatively small forces to control vast territories. Their care continues around the clock, with grooms checking animals throughout the night and maintaining equipment ready for immediate emergency use. Gentle murmur of conversation carries from guard posts where soldiers share universal military service experiences, stories of home, complaints about officers, speculation about enemy intentions, and quiet camaraderie developing among men facing danger together. These conversations, conducted in empire's diverse auxiliary forces' dozens language, remind Marcus of Roman power's cosmopolitan nature and remarkable achievement of binding together peoples from Britain to Syria under single military discipline. Occasional hammering or soaring sounds indicate essential maintenance throughout the night hours. Roman military efficiency depends not just on individual soldier courage, but on constant care of weapons, equipment, and fortifications, making organized welfare possible. Somewhere in darkness, craftsmen repair damaged shields, sharpen weapons, and maintain siege engines that may be needed in tomorrow's operations. Distant wolf howls from Germanic forests beyond the Danube serve as haunting wilderness reminders surrounding this civilization outpost. These primal untamed sounds contrast sharply with Roman camps' ordered discipline, highlighting imperial control's precarious nature along the frontier. Marcus listens to these wild voices and reflects on the thin lines separating civilization from chaos, order from barbarianism. The emperor finds comfort in these ordered activity sounds. They represent collective human effort to create something larger and more enduring than individual life. Civilization built on law, protected by disciplined force, guided by reason rather than mere passion. Even here at the known world's edge, facing barbarian tribes threatening to overturn centuries of progress, Romans remain committed to systemic organization and careful planning. A gentle breeze stirs tent walls, carrying autumn scents along the Danube, cooking fire smoke, military equipment's leather and metal, river valleys damp earth, and beneath it all, water's clean smell flowing toward the Black Sea. These familiar odours ground Marcus in his situation's physical reality, reminding him that philosophical reflection must always return to engagement with duty and action's concrete world. As night deepens and oil burns lower in his lamps, casting longer shadows across papyrus before him, Marcus's thoughts turn to one of his philosophical practice's most persistent themes: death's reality and all human achievements' temporary nature. At 49, he has lived longer than many of his contemporaries, but knows his time, like all human time, is limited and uncertain. It is not death that a man should fear, he writes, echoing his Stoic teacher's wisdom, but he should fear never beginning to live. This insight has taken special poignancy during military campaigning years, where death is daily reality rather than abstract possibility. Each morning brings reports of soldiers never returning home, young men whose lives have been cut short in empire service. Yet Marcus has learned to view mortality not as a morbid fascination or paralyzing fear source, but as a teacher clarifying what truly matters in life. Death's certainty strips away pretense and forces attention to essential questions. How should we spend limited time? What legacy do we hope to leave? What kind of person do we want to be while we have the chance? You came from nothing and you will return to nothing, he reminds himself, writing words with careful deliberation. What have you lost? This stark assessment might seem pessimistic, but for Marcus it serves as liberating function. If everything external, wealth, power, reputation, even life itself is temporary and ultimately beyond our control, then we are freed from anxiety of trying to preserve these things forever. He reflects on his empire that he has inherited and will someday pass to his successor. Rome seems eternal from single human lifetime perspective, but Marcus understands that even greater civilizations are subject to change and decay laws governing individual lives. Germanic tribes pressing against Danube frontier represent not just temporary military challenge, but reminder that all human institutions must constantly adapt or perish. Death smiles at us all, Marcus writes, developing a familiar theme, but all a man can do is smile back. This death personification as constant companion rather than distant threat reflects his mature morality acceptance. Death has walked beside him throughout his reign, in empire devastating plague, in countless frontier war casualties, in natural passing of his friends and family shaping his youth. Rather than allowing death's proximity to embitter him or drive desperate attempts to avoid the inevitable, Marcus uses it as motivation to live more fully and virtuously. Each day becomes more precious because it is limited. Each opportunity to practice virtue, serve common good, or show kindness takes enhanced significance when viewed against mortality's backdrop. The universe is change, he observes, articulating fundamental Stoic physics insights. Our life is what our thoughts make it. This principle applies not to individual existence, but to history and civilization's larger patterns. Empires rise and fall, cultures flourish and decay, ideas spread and are forgotten. The Roman Empire represents just one phase in humans' endless transformation, remarkable for achievements but not exempt from change laws governing all things. Yet within this universal flux context, individual choices retain moral significance. The character Marcus displays during his brief time on this cosmic stage, his decisions wisdom or folly, his actions kindness or cruelty, these matter not because they will be remembered forever, but because they reflect his participation in rational order underlying existence's apparent chaos. As he contemplates mortality in his quiet tent, with sleeping camp sounds around him and Germanic wilderness beyond, Marcus Aurelius embodies one of humanity's most remarkable achievements: ability to face death with equanimity, find meaning in temporary existence, and choose virtue even when no external rewards are guaranteed. As night advances towards its deepest hour, Marcus carefully sets down his reed pen and reviews pages written by lamplight. Greek words flow across papyrus in neat lines, each character formed with precision, reflecting both his excellent education and respect for ideas he is expressing. These private thoughts, never intended for any audience but himself, represent the most honest record of a human soul grappling with eternal questions while bearing temporal burdens of absolute power. He reads over his evening work with reflective attention of a student reviewing important lessons. Each passage serves as practical purpose in his ongoing effort to live according to philosophical principles. Writing these thoughts helps him clarify them in his mind and makes them readily available when facing similar future challenges. Accept the things to which fate binds you, he has written tonight, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart. This will be tested tomorrow when he returns to council chambers requiring his leadership. Some people fate has brought into his life are difficult, demanding, or treacherous. Yet his philosophical practice teaches approaching these relationships with the same virtue commitment he would offer beloved friends. The emperor carefully caps his inkpot and cleans his pen, maintaining simple philosophical practice tools with the same attention given to weapons and military equipment. These humble implements, reed, ink, and papyrus, enable him to engage in what he considers his life's most important work: wisdom cultivation and conscious examination, keeping him anchored to his deepest values. As he prepares for sleep, Marcus practices one final philosophical exercise central to his evening routine. He mentally reviews the day's events, examining his responses to various challenges and considering how he might apply Stoic principles more effectively in future situations. This conscious examination serves not to promote guilt or self-criticism, but to support ongoing character development process that Stoics consider life's central purpose. When you lie down, Marcus reminds himself, quoting from memory his teacher Epictetus' practical instructions, you will not toss and turn if you remind yourself of what you have to be grateful for. This gratitude practice before sleep counteracts natural human tendency to focus on problems, disappointment, and future anxieties. The last oil lamp flickers and dies, leaving the tent in complete darkness, except for faint starlight filtering through the leather walls. In this quiet darkness, surrounded by sleeping camp and vast wilderness beyond, Marcus Aurelius closes his eyes and prepares for sleep. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, fresh decisions, and continued opportunities to apply philosophical wisdom to leadership's practical demands. But tonight he has done his work, both as emperor and as human being seeking to understand how to live well.